Imagine stumbling upon an ancient masterpiece, something hidden away for centuries, totally untouched.
Wow.
And then when it's rediscovered, it doesn't just blow you away with its beauty, but it also holds layers, like just layers and layers of hidden meaning about a forgotten world.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going on a deep dive into just such treasure.
Sounds fascinating. What are we looking at?
We're exploring the Flying Ducks fresco. It's
Yeah.
this magnificent Tang Dynasty masterpiece uncovered in central China.
Ah, the Tang Dynasty. So a really vibrant period.
Exactly. And this isn't just, a painting. It feels more like a window, a really vivid window into the artistry, the beliefs, the whole society of one of China's most dynamic imperial period.
Right. And I think what makes this so compelling for our deep dive today
Yeah,
is that it is much more than just a pretty picture on a wall.
definitely.
Our mission for you today really is to unpack this incredible artwork. We want to give it the detail it deserves.
So where do we start?
Well, we'll trace its discovery, which was quite dramatic, almost accidental in a way.
Okay.
Then we'll peel back the layers, reveal the ingenious techniques they used to actually create it.
The how of it all.
Exactly. And decipher its symbolism, which is really rich, multifaceted. Then place it in context, the buzzing socio-political world of the Tang Dynasty.
Super important for understanding it.
Absolutely. And we'll even touch on some of the ongoing debates, the arguments that scholars still have about it today. It keeps the story alive, really.
Great. And we should probably mention the sources we're drawing on for this.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
We've pulled together a real...
So basically, we've done the groundwork.
We have. Consider this your shortcut, your way to get truly well-informed about this Tang Dynasty gem.
Okay, let's dive in. Where does the story begin?
Right. Our journey starts back in the late 1960s. This was a really pivotal time during a series of urgent rescue excavations happening across China's Shaanxi province, right in central China.
Rescue excavations. So things were being discovered during construction, that kind of thing.
Pretty much. It was a period with this burgeoning awareness of China's huge archaeological heritage. Preserving ancient sites was becoming a much bigger national priority.
Makes sense. Development versus preservation, always a tension.
Exactly. Lots of construction projects were, inadvertently digging up these invaluable historical remains. It became this race against time to document and save these treasures before they were lost forever.
You really can't overstate how important those operations were, can you? The sheer volume of discoveries must have reshaped everything.
It really did. Fundamentally changed the understanding of ancient Chinese civilization.
And the Flying Ducks fresco specifically, how did that fit in?
Well, what's really compelling here is that its discovery wasn't some isolated incident. It was actually meticulously integrated into a much larger, really coordinated conservation effort, revolutionary for its time, actually.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't just found, it was part of a plan.
Sort of. This specific discovery happened during the very same field operation that famously saw the removal of the murals of Empress Wu Hufei.
Ah, okay. Those are major pieces.
Right. They were meticulously removed, stabilized, transported piece by piece to the Shaanxi History Museum for long-term preservation.
And that whole operation was pioneering, wasn't it? For Tang wall paintings.
Absolutely. It was one of the very first large-scale systematic conservation programs specifically for Tang period wall paintings. So the fresco's preservation wasn't just luck.
No, it was part of this groundbreaking effort in Chinese archaeology and conservation, setting precedents, really, for how you handle such fragile artworks, moving beyond just digging things up to actually preserving them carefully.
That context really does make its survival feel even more special, doesn't it? Knowing it was part of this pioneering science.
It really does. Okay, so that's the discovery. What about where it was found? The setting.
Right. So the fresco isn't a standalone piece. It resides within the tomb of an aristocrat, someone from the prominent Wu family.
The Wu family. Okay.
And the tomb itself is, well, it's a significant example of Tang Dynasty tomb architecture. It follows what scholars call the semi-palace, semi-sacred space tradition.
Ah, the semi-palace, semi-sacred space. That tells you a lot about their worldview, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, these tombs weren't just burial spots. They were seen as these elaborate underground extensions of their earthly lives, kind of mimicking the luxurious spaces they lived in.
Like a palace underground.
Exactly. But also, simultaneously, there were sacred spaces, conduit for their spiritual hopes in the afterlife.
Dual purpose.
Right. And the layout of this Wu family tomb really shows that. It has an octagonal plan, with a pretty spacious main chamber.
Octagonal, is that typical?
Quite characteristic for elite burials then, yeah. It often symbolized cosmic order, like creating a mini-universe within the tomb itself, so the deceased could kind of continue their life in a spiritually elevated way.
Okay, but here's where the tomb design gets, for me, really ingenious. It's how it shapes your experience as you enter, even now.
I'll go.
The corridor leading into that main burial chamber, it isn't just flat. It's engineered with this gentle, almost imperceptible upward slope.
Huh. An upward slope.
Yeah, and it wasn't an accident or just for, ease of access. It seems like a deliberate design choice. It subtly but powerfully forces your gaze upwards as you cross the threshold into the main room.
Like it's directing your attention.
Exactly, like stage directions for where to look.
And that connects to the fresco.
Precisely. This is where the architecture and the artwork just mesh perfectly in this profound spatial and thematic way.
Okay.
Exactly at that upward gazing angle positioned right where your eye naturally goes because of the slope. That's where the fresco's flock of ducks is shown spiraling skyward.
Wow. So the architecture literally points you to the art's main theme.
It creates this incredibly powerful spatial experience, a direct link between the physical tomb structure and the artwork's meaning. It's intentional design.
That's amazing. It makes the whole experience so much more dynamic. The ascent of the ducks isn't just something you see, it's something you almost feel because of how you're moving through the space.
Truly remarkable design. It speaks volumes, I think, about the collaboration between Tang architects and artists, working together to create something so immersive.
Incredible foresight.
Ugh.
Okay, so let's shift focus. Let's unpack the how, the artistic engineering, the technical side of this masterpiece. How did they make it, and how did it last?
Right. So technical examinations of the wall surface itself, they reveal these sophisticated techniques pretty common in Tang tomb paintings.
Like what?
Well, first, the meticulous application of 2 distinct layers of thin plaster. That gave them a smooth, durable surface to work on.
The canvas, basically.
Exactly. And crucially, the painting itself was done in secco.
Ah, secco. Not true fresco.
Right. Meaning the pigments were applied to dry plaster, not wet plaster like in true fresco.
And that distinction, secco versus fresco, it's absolutely critical, isn't it, for understanding both the art and the preservation challenges.
How so?
Well, true fresco, where pigment bonds with wet plaster as it cures, is incredibly durable. The color literally becomes part of the wall.
Fused in.
Right. But secco, painting on dry plaster, gave the artist much more time for detail. They could work more slowly, use a wider range of pigments that maybe wouldn't work with wet lime.
More flexibility.
Definitely. But the trade-off is durability. The paint sits on the surface rather than being in it. So secco murals are just inherently more vulnerable over time, flaking, bubbling, degrading, which has been a huge challenge for conserving these ducks.
Makes sense. And the chemistry of the colors themselves, what held them onto that dry plaster?
Well, this is also pretty sophisticated. The mineral-based pigments were meticulously bound to that plaster layer, which was rich in lime, calcite using animal glue.
Animal glue as the binder.
Exactly. That specific combination wasn't random. It was key to its durability. The glue acted as the adhesive, holding the pigment particles, while the calcite in the plaster provided a stable surface, allowing some bonding even though it was secco. They really understood their materials.
And can we know exactly what those pigments were?
We can, actually. Thanks to modern science, we're not just guessing. Things like micro-Raman spectroscopy and SIM-EDS scans.
Okay, fancy tech. What does that mean?
Basically, they give us a precise chemical fingerprint of each color without damaging the artwork, like using tiny lasers or electron beams to see exactly what minerals are there.
Cool. So what do they find?
Well, for the reds, they use cinnabar and hematite, both pretty common, stable mineral reds. For the green, it was malachite that comes from copper.
Standard stuff for the time, maybe?
Largely, yes. But here's where it gets really interesting. The yellow.
Okay.
The scans revealed traces of vanadinite.
Vanadinite. Never heard of it.
Exactly. It's an exceptionally rare mineral pigment, especially in China back then.
Wow. So what does that tell us?
A lot, potentially. Its presence gives us clues about the Tang Dynasty's raw material supply chains. And maybe even more revealingly, about the incredibly high social status of the tomb owner, the Wu family aristocrat.
How does a pigment show status?
Well, think about it. To get and use such a scarce pigment suggests the Wu family either had immense wealth, maybe they imported it from far away, Persia, Central Asia perhaps,
right.
or they had privileged access to very specialized, maybe even imperially controlled trade networks. That one yellow pigment hints at their wealth, yes, but also the sheer reach of the Tang Empire and this family's connections within that huge system.
That's amazing. Just from a bit of yellow, what about the black?
That was simpler amorphous carbon, essentially Chinese ink. Very stable, deep black.
Okay, so incredible colors, sophisticated techniques, but you mentioned preservation challenge.
Right. Even with all this mastery, conservation is a constant battle. While the Seco technique allowed for vibrant color initially, one major ongoing issue is the photochemical darkening of cinnabar.
The red pigment.
Yeah, the bright red mercury sulfide is just notoriously sensitive to light. Over centuries, especially with certain atmospheric conditions, it transforms. It darkens.
So parts aren't red anymore.
Exactly. Certain inner wing sections of the ducks, which would have been this dazzling, vibrant red-orange, have sadly turned a kind of muted brownish color now. It's a constant fight against time and chemistry.
A reminder of how fragile these things are, even when they seem to have survived so well.
Absolutely. It highlights the dynamic nature of conservation.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the how. Shall we dive into the what? The meaning, the symbolism.
Yes, let's unpack that. Because the iconography of the flying ducks fresco can be read on several levels, right? Giving us these deep insights into Tang beliefs.
Definitely. It's not just what you see, but what it means. And in traditional Chinese symbolism, ducks carry very specific, layered meanings.
Like what?
Well, if you see them in pairs, they're often symbols of loyalty, fidelity, marital harmony. Very important values.
Okay, but these are in a flock.
Right. And when they're shown in a big unified flock, like we see here spiraling up the wall, the symbolism shifts. It comes to represent migration, transformation, a journey.
Ah, like their seasonal migrations.
Exactly. That natural behavior gets imbued with significant cultural and spiritual meaning, reflecting cycles of life, change, and passage.
And there's a deeper philosophical connection, too, isn't there, to Taoism?
Yes, absolutely. Because ducks move so freely between different realms, water, land, air, they beautifully embody the yin-yang balance that's so central to Taoist cosmology.
Moving between elements.
Their fluidity reflects that harmonious interplay of opposing forces that make up the universe. So it's not just birds. It's a dynamic representation of cosmic harmony, interconnectedness, rendered in pigment.
That's quite profound. What about for the tomb's occupant? What did flying birds mean in that context?
Well, for the Tang aristocracy, whose beliefs often blended Taoist and Buddhist ideas, flying birds and tomb murals were very often associated with the soul's ascent.
Ascent to where?
To a kind of celestial paradise, often called the Abadi Gardens, or sometimes the Western Gardens, a mythical realm of immortals, ultimate bliss.
So the birds represent the soul heading to paradise.
It was a prevalent and comforting motif, yeah. Linking birds with the soul's journey offered hope for eternal peace and transformation after death.
And the fresco itself, the way it's painted, reinforces this idea.
Powerfully. That distinct upward-sloping diagonal movement we see in the flock, which mirrors the architectural slope of the corridor.
Right, the way your gaze is led up.
It directly reinforces that theological idea of the soul's route upwards, towards the heavens. It's not static. It's a dynamic picture of a spiritual journey. A visual prayer, almost, for the deceased's successful passage. The design literally lifts your gaze, and metaphorically, the soul.
Amazing integration. Now, the style of painting, the technique, you mentioned the calligraphic strokes.
Yes. The ducks are depicted with remarkable anatomical accuracy. They clearly observe ducks closely.
Really?
But their bodies aren't filled in with meticulous detail. Instead, they're drawn with these bold, confident, almost calligraphic single strokes. It balances realism with expressive artistry.
And that specific style reminds you of something.
It immediately brings to mind the famous phoebi or flying white technique.
Flying white.
Yeah. It's often associated with the legendary court painter Wu Daozi. It involves using a drier brush, so the strokes intentionally leave these unpainted gaps, the flying whites within the lines.
What effect does that create?
It creates this sense of rapid movement, energy, spontaneity, like the brush itself was flying. It really breathes life and dynamism into the image.
And is there a connection to Wu Daozi here?
Well, stylistic analyses by prominent scholars, like Wu Heng, for example,
Right.
specifically link this kind of broken, fast brushwork, this phoebi style, to the workshop of Wu Daozi.
Wu Daozi's workshop, he was a huge deal, right?
Arguably one of the most influential painters of the entire Tang era, famous for his huge murals, dynamic figures. So this raises a big question for art historians.
Could this be by him? Or someone working directly for him?
Exactly. Could this fresco be a direct link? if not to the master himself, then to the highly skilled artist working under his influence in his imperial court workshop. The stylistic clues are definitely compelling.
Even without a signature.
Right, which we'll come back to. But it's incredible to think we might be seeing the hand, or at least the direct influence, of such a legendary figure.
Truly is. Okay, so to really get the fresco's message, the choice of ducks, we need that context, right? The Tang Dynasty world it came from.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
By the mid-8th century, the time this was likely made, the imperial capital, Chang'an.
Modern sheen.
Right, it wasn't just a city, it was arguably the largest, most vibrant, most globalized hub on Earth. The eastern end of the Silk Road just thriving with trade.
Goods, ideas, people flowing in and out.
Constantly. And this incredible economic prosperity had a massive impact on the elite, the aristocracy. Families like the Wu clan accumulated significant wealth.
And spent some of it on tombs.
A significant portion, yeah. Commissioning these grand, elaborate tomb programs, like the one we're discussing, they weren't just private burials.
For like public statements.
Exactly. Monumental statements of power, prestige, status, cultural identity. Showing off their wealth, their court connections, their beliefs about the afterlife.
And the Wu clan specifically, did they have a particular identity they wanted to express?
They did. Court records actually show the Wu clan originally came from the Jiangnan regions.
Down south. Rice country.
Precisely. An area famous for wetlands, waterways, lots of waterfowl. And this connection to their ancestral lands meant they developed this unique iconography specifically associated with water birds.
Ah. So the flying ducks aren't just generic symbols.
It seems not just generic. Scholars interpret this choice as the family literally bringing their economic identity, their regional heritage, their lineage, directly into the sacred space of their tomb.
It's like their signature almost. This is who we are.
A sophisticated visual way of saying, this is our heritage. These symbols represent our prosperity, our connection to the land. It's a fascinating mix of personal history, economics, and symbolic art.
And was this unique to the Wu family, using water birds like this?
What's really interesting here is, no, it wasn't isolated. Other aristocratic tombs dug up from the same century, like those of Prince Li Shou, Princess Li Zhen, even the Astana 217 tomb out in Xinjiang.
They also have ducks or water birds.
Prominently featured, yes. Ducks, geese, other water birds, which strongly suggests the flying ducks fresco isn't some one-off.
As part of a trend.
Right. It's powerful evidence for the rising popularity, the widespread use of a broader birdflower painting language during the Tang era. This whole artistic movement celebrating nature, giving it rich symbolic meaning, it clearly resonated with the Tang elite.
So it's part of a bigger artistic conversation happening across the empire.
Exactly. And speaking of bigger conversations, one of the most remarkable things about the Wu tomb isn't just the individual murals, but the narrative continuity you see when you read all the painted surfaces together.
The whole tomb tells a story.
The entire space tells a coherent, multi-layered story, a grand cosmic journey designed for the deceased.
How does that work? Can you give an example?
Let's focus on the north wall, as it really exemplifies this integrated storytelling. At the very top, in the upper register, you have this powerful trinity. The sun, the moon, and the stars.
The heavens.
Right, defining cosmic time, setting the universal stage for the narrative below, connecting the tomb to the cosmos.
And below the stars.
Immediately below that celestial sphere, you find our scene, the flying ducks, representing the soul's journey, perfectly placed to show that passage from Earth towards the heavens.
The ascent.
The ascent. And then beneath the ducks, on the lowest level, there's a depiction of a serene lotus pond.
What does the lotus pond signify?
Earthly renewal, purity, the cycle of rebirth. So you have this complete, perfectly ordered visual narrative from the eternal cosmos through the soul's journey down to earthly cycles.
Wow. Sky, journey, earth.
Precisely. This vertical hierarchy sky, middle earth, is a classic example of that trinity. It wasn't just decoration. It was a core cosmological concept in Taoist and Buddhist thought that really permeated Tang culture.
Mapping the universe onto the tomb.
Exactly. Turning the burial chamber into a microcosm of the cosmos. The top is heaven's eternity, the middle is life transformation, the bottom is the mundane world or rebirth, a complete philosophical framework for the afterlife.
And this kind of structure, this logic, we see it elsewhere in Tang tombs.
Oh, yes. The arrangement in the Wu tomb shares the same aesthetic logic as other really famous contemporary Tang murals. Think of Prince Zhangwai's incredible polo game mural at Qinling Dynamic Action.
Right, I know that one.
Or Li Diaojian's elaborate multi-panel imitation landscape, Fresco in Fuping, creating this expansive environment. They were all part of a shared artistic and philosophical approach. The tomb as a complete narrative space.
So tying it all together, what's the big message of the Wu Tombs program?
Well, if you connect it all, this meticulously planned narrative simultaneously refers back to the deceased's earthly life, their status, their heritage.
The water birds.
Right. While powerfully reinforcing that overarching ideology of immortality, the soul's journey to paradise. So it's a complete vision, life, death, the journey beyond, all woven into the tomb's fabric, an immersive spiritual and cultural blueprint for eternity.
A roadmap for the afterlife. That's profound. Now, let's shift gears slightly. What about the Fresco's modern life? Its journey after discovery. Conservation plays a big role here.
Huge. The conservation chronology itself has really shaped the fresco's recent history and its survival.
So what happened right after excavation in '68?
Well, when those large wall pieces containing the fresco were first carefully cut into blocks, they were immediately strengthened. They used an early polyester-based consolidant.
Polyester.
Yeah, for its time, that was cutting-edge stuff. A pioneering way to stabilize these incredibly fragile murals so they could even be moved and preserved long-term. It was crucial to stop them crumbling right away.
But material science moves fast.
It does. By the 1980s, conservation science had evolved rapidly, and the limits of that early polyester became clear. It started to yellow, become brittle, degrade.
Not ideal.
Not at all. So
Yeah.
it needed a new intervention. Conservators then switched to a much more stable, less reactive material, an acrylic microemulsion system.
Reflecting better science.
Exactly. A deeper understanding of long-term stability, reversibility, key principles in modern conservation. It shows how the field constantly evolves.
And can people see the fresco now? Where is it?
Yes, absolutely. Since 2011, the Shaanxi History Museum has proudly exhibited the frescoes. They're in this specially built underground gallery.
Underground. Why?
For preservation. The space isn't just for display. It's designed to keep them under meticulously ideal conditions.
Like controlled temperature and humidity.
Exactly. A constant 55% relative humidity, crucial to stop the ancient materials expanding and contracting. And very low flex lighting, really dim light to minimize exposure and prevent more photochemical damage to the pigments.
But even with all that, the work isn't done.
Rarely is in conservation. It's a continuous, vigilant effort. They're still using cutting-edge techniques like X-ray fluorescence mapping.
What does that show them?
It lets them meticulously track the ongoing cinnabar darkening we talked about, and also things like chlorine-based degradation of the malachite green, which can make it go gray or powdery.
So they're still monitoring these slow changes.
Constantly.
Yeah.
And this monitoring leads to developing very specific, targeted cleaning and filling protocols to address these persistent issues. It's all about ensuring its survival for future generations. It's this nonstop scientific, artistic, ethical endeavor.
A real commitment to preserving the past.
It really highlights the dynamic nature of it all. And speaking of ongoing processes, that brings us nicely to some of the academic questions and mysteries that still surround the fresco. Debates that keep its story evolving.
Oh, right, the debates. What are scholars still arguing about?
Well, one of the main points, maybe surprisingly, is the precise taxonomy of the birds themselves. Are they definitely ducks?
Wait, really? They look like ducks?
The majority of researchers agree. Observing their short, wide beaks, body shape, silhouette, they firmly believe they're Chinese mandarin ducks, or maybe mallards, common water birds there.
Okay, so what's the counter-argument?
Well, a compelling minority of scholars focuses on their flight profile, the specific way they're shown soaring up in that spiral. They correlate that more with wild geese.
Geese also migrate in flocks.
Right. And while high-res photos in the inspection reports tend to back the duck idea, they've also tried analyzing feather pigments, looking at phosphorus-calcium ratios. It hasn't yielded entirely conclusive results yet, hasn't definitively settled it. So the mystery remains. A small point, maybe, but it shows the meticulousness and sometimes the ambiguity of art history.
Fascinating. What's another major debate?
A perhaps even bigger one revolves around the identity of the artist.
Ah, the Wu Daozi connection again.
Exactly. Those masterful Phoebe lines strongly suggest that stylistic kinship with his workshop. But here's the fundamental challenge. There is absolutely no signature or inscription from the artist. None at all.
Why not, if they were that good?
It wasn't an oversight. It was actually part of the strict Tang court protocol. It mandated anonymity for tomb painters.
They weren't allowed to sign their work.
No. No matter how skilled, they were considered imperial artisans carrying out the patron's wishes. The glory was for the patron or the emperor, not the individual artist.
So how do you attribute anything then?
It raises this huge question for art historians, right? How do you confidently attribute such sophisticated art when the official system actively suppressed the artist's name? You have to rely on style, material evidence, context, not a signature. It's a real puzzle.
A profound challenge for attribution. Any other big debates?
Yes, related to the conservation we discussed. The limits of color reconstruction. It's a hot topic globally, and this fresco is a perfect case study.
Because of the darkened cinnabar.
Exactly. Those inner wing areas, originally vibrant red-orange, now look brownish. We have strong scientific evidence of the original color.
So the ethical question is,
Should we restore them? Is it right or responsible to repaint those areas to match the original fiery hue, even though we know what it looked like?
what are the arguments?
Well, it divides the conservation community. Some argue for historical accuracy, showing the art as the artist intended. Others argue for minimal intervention, respecting the passage of time, letting the artifact show its age. There are really strong, valid points on both sides. It's complex.
No easy answers.
Definitely not. And these ongoing debates show that even ancient artifacts keep living, evolving, raising new questions. Our understanding is never really complete.
Absolutely. So bringing it all together, what's the final takeaway? The Flying Ducks fresco's lasting legacy, its art historical significance, it seems huge.
Oh, it's monumental.
Yeah.
Far more than just a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
First, that combination of anatomical observation, they really knew birds, with that dynamic calligraphic line work. It's powerful proof that Tang tomb murals were produced in imperial court workshops.
High-level professional art.
Exactly. Not amateur stuff.
Yeah.
Royal-level art by highly trained professionals, indicating a really sophisticated artistic system.
Okay, what else?
Secondly, that spiral composition, the sense of movement. It's incredible for its time. It's seen as a significant precursor, a harbinger of the impressionistic dynamism that fully blooms centuries later in Song Dynasty bird and flower painting.
So Tang artists were already pushing boundaries.
It suggests they were already experimenting with conveying motion, vitality, action in a static medium, setting precedents.
Third point.
Thirdly, how the scene blends the Wu family's specific identity, their Jiannan roots, with this natural landscape allegory. It beautifully shows how Tang sociology, things like lineage, wealth, regional ties, were deeply woven into the aesthetics of the time. It's a cultural statement.
Art reflecting society.
Deeply. Fourthly, and this really highlights the global Tang world, the duck icon shares a visual language with migratory bird themes in contemporary Sogdian and Iranian wall paintings from Central Asia, Persia.
Wow, connections across the Silk Road.
It embodies that vibrant multiculturalism, a rich exchange of ideas, motifs, imagery across vast distances, proof of how connected the world was artistically.
Amazing.
And lastly, maybe the most tangible point, that discovery of the rare Vanadinite yellow. It gives us direct, hard data about the Tang raw material supply chain.
More than just pretty colors.
Right. It speaks directly to the economic reach and, by extension, the exceptionally high social status of the Wu family. That tiny detail about one rare pigment tells us so much about their economic power, the trading networks they could tap into.
So putting it all together.
The Flying Ducks fresco isn't just art. It's a cornerstone for understanding the Tang Dynasty in its full, astonishing complexity. Artistically, culturally, socially, economically. It's a multidisciplinary key.
A silent witness that speaks volumes, like you said.
If you know how to listen.
So we've really journeyed through time and art today, haven't we? Exploring this incredible Flying Ducks fresco. We've seen its dramatic discovery, its context in early Chinese conservation.
Marveled at the technical brilliance, the secco, the rare pigments.
Uncovered those layers of symbolism, Tang cosmology, the soul's journey, Taoist harmony.
Placed it in that grand socio-political landscape of the Silk Road era, imperial wealth, family identity.
And even peeked into those ongoing debates that keep this ancient artwork alive in modern scholarship and conservation today.
Yeah, the Flying Ducks fresco, it really isn't just a beautiful image, is it? It's this silent, enduring witness. A witness to a globalized empire, a deeply personal spiritual journey, and just a profound testament to art's power to carry meaning across millennia.
A powerful reminder.
It reminds us that even in what look like simple images, there are these profound stories waiting. Intricate histories, connections across time and culture, just waiting to be discovered.
So maybe the final thought for you, our listener, is this. What other silent witnesses exist around us, maybe hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to uncover their stories? What else might be right in front of you, just begging for a deeper dive?